The movie begins by showing a steel factory in a place called Clairton, in the state of Pennsylvania. A freight car is seen entering the city, blowing dust and smoke. Several workers are working next to a raging fire in the factory. Some of these workers are Mike, Nick, Steve, Axel, and Stanley. On their way back from the factory, they decided to go deer hunting that night. Steve doesn't agree, because that night he is getting married to a girl named Angela. Angela is seen there, getting ready for her wedding. Angela had another girl named Linda as her friend. Even though Linda is Nick's girlfriend, Mike really likes Linda. Then Steven and Angela got married in church. After the wedding ceremony was over, Nick and Mike sat by the river talking. From their conversation, it is revealed that Nick, Mike, and Steve will join the American military service. And then they will move to Vietnam, because the situation of the war in Vietnam has become very terrible. America was sending some troops to help South Vietnam, so that American soldiers in South Vietnam could fight against North Vietnam. And among these armies sent by America were Nick, Mike, and Steve. They will join the military. The next morning, a group of 5 people set out in a car. They wanted to hunt one last time before going to Vietnam. After eating and drinking, everyone went out separately to hunt. Mike saw a deer in the mountains and killed it with one shot. Exactly 1 year after this incident, in 1969, the huts of small villages in the dense jungle were suddenly attacked. The attack was carried out from a helicopter. Explosions started happening one after another. All the animals fled from there to save their lives. And after the attack, the bloodied bodies of American and South Vietnamese soldiers were seen lying there. The attack came from North Vietnam. A North Vietnamese soldier came to a spot in the ground and built a bamboo gate with his hands and feet. Below, it could be seen that many local people were hiding in that place. The soldier threw a bomb at the people, blocked the gate, and left. Many people died in that bomb explosion. Only a little girl was seen with a small child in her arms. The enemy soldier was searching around with a gun in his hand, looking for anyone still alive. At that moment, one of the wounded soldiers regained consciousness. This soldier was Mike. As the injured girl, holding the baby in her arms, continued forward in the hope of survival, enemy soldiers spotted her. They brutally shot and killed both children. By now, Mike had stood up. Seeing the brutal killing before his eyes, he set fire to the enemy soldier and burned him alive. The North Vietnamese soldier died screaming. But Mike was not at peace with this either. Mike kept firing at the burning body. Soon after, American helicopters arrived. More soldiers descended from the helicopters in groups and surrounded the area. 2 more of these soldiers were Nick and Steve. The 3 friends had joined the army after training for the past year. But at that time, North Vietnamese fighters began to attack with bombs, one after another. And one day, they captured American and South Vietnamese soldiers. A hut could be seen on the river, and in front of it, a bamboo-made prison in the river, where American soldiers and some South Vietnamese fighters were being held. The size of this bamboo prison was exactly the same as the size of those people. These people were almost up to their necks in water. Only their heads were somehow above water, so that they could breathe and survive. These people were being held captive by the Viet Cong, that is to say, guerrilla fighters. Guerrilla fighters were people who didn't actually have a formal army. They had no uniforms or camps like an army. They would divide into small groups and hide in the mountains and forests, taking advantage of the situation to ambush the enemy and take them prisoner. Most North Vietnamese fighters were like this. They were called the Viet Cong, and these Viet Cong were fighting for North Vietnam against South Vietnam. They always wanted North and South Vietnam to be united, and for communist rule to be imposed on all of Vietnam. But the American government didn't want that. So the American government was helping South Vietnam so that North Vietnam could be defeated. Anyway, one of the Viet Cong men used the gun he had and blew up a few parts of the bamboo prison and spat on the people. Not only the bamboo prison, but the basement of the hut made of buses and cars that was submerged in water also held American soldiers. Among them were Nick, Mike, and Steven. These North Vietnamese fighters tortured captured American soldiers. They were forced to play a deadly game called Russian roulette. In this game, the gun had only 1 bullet and was rotated on a table. We also saw such a game in the Squid Game web series. After rotating the gun, the person facing the gun's barrel had to be told to fire the gun and shoot themselves in the head. This would continue in rounds until one of them was shot, and during this game, the Viet Cong fighters would bet money on those people. The soldiers who survived the game would be tied up in another prison, and if anyone refused to play the game, they would be locked up in a well. While playing this game, an American soldier was shot in the head, and blood started gushing out. Stephen almost lost his mental balance at the sound of all this torture. But Mike reassured him. He said, "Don't worry, we will go back home again." The surviving soldiers in the game were badly injured. Blood was dripping from their heads and feet, and those who had died were being left in the river. Thus, it was Steve and Mike's turn to play the game of death. Steve started crying. But there was no way to survive without playing the game. Steve held the gun to his head and shot himself for the first time. The bullet went off, but luckily, Steve's gun was pointed upwards, so the bullet grazed the side of his head and hit the ceiling. He was only injured, not killed. Blood started coming out of his head. Steve was then taken to the prison in the river to be imprisoned. Mike was kept to play the game with another soldier, so he was thrown down. Steve somehow managed to catch his breath while holding onto a bus. When all the soldiers had finished playing the game, only Mike and Nick were left alive. Mike said, "It's all in our hands now. We have to do what we have to do. Forget Steve. I don't think Steve will survive." Mike then made a plan to escape. He said, "We need to play the game with 3 bullets instead of 1. That is the only way to survive from here." "How?" he said he would explain later. During the game, when it was Mike's turn to shoot, Nick would grab the gun from the closest guard and attack the enemies. That was their plan. Then Mike and Nick were seen being taken upstairs. It was Nick's turn to shoot first. But when he fired, the bullet didn't go off. Then it was Mike's turn. Mike said he wanted to play with 3 bullets. The enemy fighters, that is to say, the Viet Cong members, agreed to this. It was Mike's turn to shoot. He bravely pulled the trigger while staring into the enemy's eyes but survived. When Nick didn't want to play anymore, the enemy leader started slapping him repeatedly. Mike was stopped when he got angry and started to fight. Nick finally put the gun to his own head and pulled the trigger, but he also survived. Both of them started crying. The Viet Cong fighters laughed loudly, and then, when it was Mike's turn to shoot again, he realized that if he fired this time, it would definitely be a hit. So, seizing the opportunity, he shot the enemy leader right in the middle of the forehead, along with 2 others from his group. Nick grabbed one of the men's guns and started shooting. Mike and Nick fired together and killed all the enemy men. But Nick was having trouble escaping because his legs were hurting. Mike helped him and somehow managed to escape from there. On the way, they pulled Steve out of the prison in the middle of the river. The 3 of them crossed the Satre River with the help of a tree trunk and looked around. As they were wading through the river, Steve completely lost his balance and started screaming and crying. He said, "I want to go home. Take me home." Mike and Nick covered Steve's face and tried to calm him. They continued to move along the river with the help of the tree trunk, but there was always one fear in their minds. North Vietnamese fighters could attack from any direction at any time. At one point, they heard a sound. A little later, they saw several helicopters flying overhead. These were American helicopters. They started shouting and waving their hands when they saw the helicopters. "Save us! Help us!" they screamed. But the people inside the helicopters couldn't see them because the helicopters were making a loud noise. The 3 of them hung from a bridge over the river to prevent themselves from being swept further away by the river current. Mike climbed onto the bridge and pulled the other 2 up. Luckily, a helicopter spotted them. A soldier in the helicopter pulled Nick up, and the other 2 somehow managed to cling to the helicopter. But hanging from a helicopter was no longer possible. Steve couldn't hold on any longer and fell into the water. Mike also jumped into the river to save him. He swam across to Steve, and with great difficulty, lifted him onto the rocks. The helicopter left from there. Steve's leg was badly injured. He couldn't even move his legs. Mike carried him on his back and continued on. While walking, they saw a large crowd of people in one place, all of them carrying belongings and moving in a certain direction. A cargo truck was parked there, and a fire was burning in one place, with black smoke filling the sky. From within that smoke, a helicopter was emerging. Mike arrived there with Steve on his shoulder. He saw a car full of South Vietnamese soldiers and left Steve there because he didn't know how far he could continue walking with Steve on his shoulders. These people were heading toward the refugee camp. Mike started walking with them. Nick was treated at the American Army Hospital. There, Nick looked out through the window and saw the bodies of dead soldiers being carried away. Nick was scared. Nick remembered his family and started crying. After being released from the hospital, Nick tried to contact Linda on the phone, but failed. Mike couldn't find anyone anywhere. While wandering around here and there, he fell in love with a girl. The girl was a prostitute. The girl took Nick with her to her room, and then nothing happened. The poor guy had just left the hospital, so it was possible or not. He left there and heard the sound of gunshots. He went closer twice and saw 2 people carrying dead bodies and putting them in a place. In fact, the Russian bullet game was going on inside that room. Even though Nick didn't want to go inside, a man forced him there. This man was a French businessman named Julian Green. The game that was going on inside made Nick very angry when he saw it, because what happened to them while playing this game was still vivid in his memory. Nick left from there. Meanwhile, Mike came here looking for Nick. Seeing Nick, he ran after him, but Nick did not see Mike, and he got into the businessman's car and left. Mike returned to his hometown of Clairton. The next morning, when Mike went to see Linda, Linda asked about Nick. But the thing is, Nick was nowhere to be found. There had been no news of Nick since he got into the businessman's car. Where did Nick go? A few days passed like this. Mike went hunting again with some of his new companions. He started walking up the mountain with a gun on his shoulder. He started chasing a deer. As Mike was about to kill it, something suddenly occurred to him. He didn't kill the deer. He fired into the air. He let the deer go free and sat down by a fountain. After seeing death so closely, he now understood what the value of a life could be, so he didn't do anything to the deer. Mike checked on Stephen that day and found out that Stephen was in a wheelchair. He didn't have 2 legs. The one who had fallen into the river that day while escaping from the Viet Cong had his legs broken, and those legs could not be treated anymore. Both legs had to be amputated. Seeing Steve's condition, Mike went out to look for Nick. Vietnam again. While looking for Nick on his way to Vietnam, he saw what a hell ordinary people in Vietnam were living in. There were fights and stone throwing going on every day, and it had become difficult for the police to stop them. People were running around, carrying their belongings. A fierce fire was burning somewhere, and the sky was filled with black smoke. A car parked on the street was on fire, searching in the dark of night. Mike arrived at the French businessman Julian Green's place, the car in which he had last seen Nick get into. When asked about Nick, he initially refused to give Nick's address, but when Mike offered him a large sum of money, Green agreed to take him to Nick via a dangerous river route. They moved forward in a small boat at night. Even at this time of night, many boats were burning on the river. Fires were burning in some boats nearby. The bridge was so crowded that only a few people were able to cross the river. Through all this, the 2 of them reached their destination. Green told Mike to go down in front of a hut. Then he went up the stairs. After talking to someone, he told Mike that he would have to pay $1,000 to get in. But even then, he had to pay another $500 to enter, and he was shocked when he went inside the room. That same game of Russian roulette was going on there too. A man was shot dead right in front of Mike's eyes, and then he saw Nick playing. Mike tried to stop him, but surprisingly, Nick refused to recognize Mike. Mike got angry and started hitting Nick hard in the throat. Nick left from there. Mike gave a lot of money to the people who were running the game and said that this game would be between him and his friend. The game of death began. Nick fired the gun first and survived. Mike also survived in the same way. Mike kept reminding Nick of different moments they had spent together. He said, "Imagine, we fought in the Vietnam War together." After much effort, Nick remembered everything. But just then, while they were playing the game, Nick put a gun to his head and pulled the trigger. Blood started gushing out of his head. Mike screamed and cried, holding Nick's head. Nick died. Nick's body was brought back to America. The last thing the film shows is their story. They were 3 friends who had been living a happy life, but the war disrupted all their lives. One person lost his legs and became permanently paralyzed. One person died, and another would live with the mental pain of that war for the rest of his life. The movie ends here. It is surprising to think that this incident is not a fictional event. It really happened. Thanks for watching this recap. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to comment below and let me know what else movie or series you want me to recap next.